copy the link. And let me see, I'm putting it in here. Where's the about thing? Details. Trying to add it. Hello. Yeah, I just realized that I didn't set it to I set it to private. So I've had to get a new link. So I've put it in the part now, in the discussion. So if you go there, you should be able to.
Why aren't you putting it in the about though?
Yeah, I'm trying to find where it is. Oh, there it is. Got it. I'm in about now, but I'm trying to find where to put it in the about. So, pardon? Bye. So I have it in the about page and I have it in the discussion. So I am hoping that people start seeing it. I can see, I think you're there. I've got one person there and I think that's you. So can you type anything? Can you type something? So put it in the about thing. Put it there. This is where my neurodiversity comes in. I'm so silly. It also says my class starts in 45 minutes, which is really weird. Why would it say it starts in 45 minutes? Oh, there we go. It says my class is happening now. Hey, there we go. I've got things looking a little bit better now. So, you're typing something. So I'm going to talk to you guys. And then we'll see what happens. People might join when they can or not at all. So, okay. Alrighty. And now it says there's no one there, which is really weird. Alrighty. So, you're messaging me. Hi. Anthony's messaging me something. Because you two are on there. Okay. I can't, it says no one's on there. So, anyway, I will start. Maybe someone is actually on there. You never know. My, planning didn't go as well as I thought. I thought I was all ready. and then and then I realized when I went to go and look at the link, it said it couldn't you couldn't see it because it was on private. So I then had to I then had to do another one, and so that was really dumb of me. But next time I will know. Learning curve. So yeah, it keeps dropping off saying 1 and 2 people. So that's weird. All right, here we go. So I guess I'll talk to you guys. Okay, so my name is Gemma, and I have been an educator for over 20 years. I also am dyslexic myself and have a daughter who is neurodivergent as well. I have a company I have started building called Dreamcatcher Academic Therapy and Consulting. And I started that when I got out of the classroom because I was frustrated with what I was seeing in the classroom and the lack of support that the students were getting who were neurodivergent. So I was seeing these kids who could be catered for better and who weren't being, and it was really frustrating. And I wasn't being allowed to do what I really would have liked to have done for them in the classroom. So I decided to leave and start my own company to support these children the way science is saying they should be supported, and so using evidence-based practice. So my company has been going for just on 2 years now, and the majority of our clients we support are neurodivergent, and we very, very rarely have students who don't have a diagnosis. Most of the time, our students we support have comorbid conditions. So they will have dyslexia and ADHD, or are autistic and have ADHD and dyslexia, or they have dyscalculia or something like that as well. So that's the type of student we specialise in. Also, in my journey as a specialist tutor and a parent, I have noticed the big gap between treatment plans and identification for males and females. So what I've noticed is that girls are being picked up later for a whole lot of learning differences and neurodiversities than boys are, and so that's impacting their education a whole lot because we're not getting to it until later. So what, especially I guess with ADHD and ASD, so autism, they have historically been known as a boys' disorder, or something that only boys have. And in fact, when autism was first, I guess, discovered, it was really thought that girls didn't have autism at all. It was just a boys' thing. And it's been thought that girls are not as affected by ADHD as boys are. However, with recent studies, and I can put those on the Facebook page after this, recent studies suggest that it is actually due to gender bias that girls aren't being identified. And also, because girls, their symptoms are different to boys, and they're not being noticed. So there's things that educators and as parents and the wider community, we need to kind of get better at identifying how girls are coming across with their symptoms of ADHD and autism. And so part of it is that girls mimic and mask really well. So girls are able to look around and see how others are behaving and what they are expected to do, and they are able to continue to do that in environments outside of the home. So they will look at their friends and see, okay, this is the way we're meant to behave in this situation, and so they will do that. But when these girls get home, when they've been having to mask or camouflage or whatever you would like to call it all day, then these girls are having real problems and having meltdowns at home. And so what that is creating is also the experience where the teacher is not identifying issues because these girls are so good at being able to hold on and camouflage until they get home, and then they have their meltdowns in a safe environment. So that's one reason why girls aren't being identified, and how they differ to boys. Often boys have a harder time holding on to their feelings, and they release them a whole lot more than girls do. So that's one reason. Also, with things like dyslexia and dyscalculia, girls do ask their friends for support for a lot more than boys do. Boys often, not wanting to stereotype, but in my experience, boys often sit back and don't do the work if they're not sure how to do it, whereas girls often really get the support of their friends to do that. And so again, they fly under the radar because they're able to kind of work their way through it with the support and following friends and looking at what's on worksheets and things like that. I know of some girls actually who aren't identified with dyslexia or dyscalculia until high school, and mid to late high school, when it starts to really become quite tricky for them, where a lot of work is being done at home. So assignments are being done where it's harder to really get that support from friends. So these girls have been able to find ways to really get through for all that time. And now when it's starting to become really quite tricky, it's being picked up. Which is obviously affects their schooling if they're not being picked up until later on. So other things that girls do differently than boys. So I've just made some notes here. So some misconceptions about girls with learning differences to boys. So for example, I know we were actually told this when we were going through a diagnosis for our daughter, but I have heard it before from other parents as well, that girls can't be autistic, particular girls can't be autistic because they're too social, which goes back to the whole mimicking and camouflaging and masking thing. So that's a real misconception that we kind of need to get over. Also, that girls' repetitive behaviors are less obscure, and they don't actually have them. So it can't be autism or ADHD because their hyperfocus is not really on anything kind of out there or different, or it's not really affecting them. But girls often find things to hyperfocus on that are classified as more culturally appropriate. So, for example, particular books or book series, characters, movies, makeup, fashion, horses, dance, gymnastics, things like that we are able to accept more and understand more. But what you probably don't know is that those girls are really, really focusing on them, and often can't talk about much else or can't think about much else. And it is actually obscuring other things in their life. But again, because it's more of a culturally appropriate interest, it's kind of overlooked. Another thing that often is said is, well, girls are just shy, and it's more, again, culturally appropriate, apparently, for girls to be shy and for them to be able to go under radar, and it's more expected for boys to be more outgoing, which again feeds into the whole they can't have ADHD or ASD because of that. So you can kind of see how our expectations of girls really influences that diagnosis of autism and ADHD, especially. There are a lot of girls who are being diagnosed with mental health conditions such as anxiety and other things like that. And in fact, what's happening is these girls actually do have ASD, so they are autistic or do have ADHD as a part of it as well. But what's happening is the anxiety is being noticed first or only, and that's the only thing that's being treated. And people are questioning why perhaps the treatment is not super successful for these girls. It's because there's a missing, all the diagnoses haven't been found, and so there's missing parts that we could do to support these girls. A little bit of a tangent. I do know actually quite a lot of older females, so females who are mothers now and perhaps see themselves in their children after a diagnosis, and now going back themselves to be to have a diagnosis, and they are coming away with their diagnosis as being autistic or ADHD, and have had diagnosis of anxiety or other mental health conditions, but always thought there was something a little bit more to it. And it's not until they've had children that they realize that maybe they are autistic themselves or they have ADHD themselves, and they've gone back as an adult to get this diagnosis. And although they're not necessarily seeking a whole lot of treatment for it as an adult, they are experiencing a whole lot of understanding about themselves a little bit more as an older female with ADHD or who are autistic. So that I find that actually really quite interesting, that a whole lot of females are now going back to be diagnosed because they have kids who are neurodivergent. So going back to some of the misconceptions that I've got here, talking on dyslexia or dyscalculia, mainly dyslexia, girls can often pick up the gist of a book and comprehend that as well, and they're easy, and they pick up the picture cues and things like that, even though we're not meant to encourage them at all to look at the pictures for the cues, but girls are able to pick up on those subtle things. And so again, people or teachers say, well, it can't be dyslexia because they actually are really good at this, or they have great imagination for their writing or something like that. Also, again, in the classroom, girls are often able to follow what the rest of the class are doing for following instructions. So even if they're inattentive ADHD and kind of their attention hasn't been focused on the class, they're able to kind of watch quickly what everyone else is doing and catch up. Whereas often boys have more of a hyperactive ADHD. And so it's a lot more in your face, I guess. for them to have their diagnosis, whereas girls have a lot more of the inattentive side. And so again, people may think they're shy, or they're just off in their own little in imagination or something like that. And the hyperactive side of the girls can be things like blurting out in class, and then they're just teachers and others just say that they're really talkative. It can be doing dances around the school, which is or in class, which is again a more culturally appropriate for things for girls to do. And so we're really kind of missing some cues that these girls are telling us that we also need to look at the testing for the girls as well. And again, studies have shown that the tests that are run for ADHD and ASD for girls are actually more gender biased. And so there are researchers who are currently looking into tests that can perhaps be gender specific. And so the girls will be able to, their traits, their autistic traits or their ADHD traits will be able to be identified better. Where so like I say, really at the moment they're so boy focused, and so much back in the day where Cohen was first doing his diagnosis of autism and things like that, and the thought that only boys are autistic and ADHD. So we really need to come and educate the teachers as well about what they're looking for and how girls and boys are really different and present differently in the classroom for all of the learning differences, for dyslexia and dyscalculia, for ADHD and for autism. And as a society, we need to also accept that girls are in fact are on the spectrum, and look for how they present and what we can do to support the girls in their life skills and to potentially cut down on the anxiety and mental health issues that come further on in their lives when this ADHD and autism goes undiagnosed. Just having a look at my notes, I feel like I'm just rambling on a little bit. So just to go through some of the traits that you're looking at for girls who are autistic and have ADHD or anxiety. So the 3 A's, they're called, really, they really work and interlink a lot together. So there's a lot of overlap that happens. And so that's why it takes quite a few tests sometimes and specialists to really get down to what the issues are. So, for example, some girls often they mimic, like I've said, they mimic and they're able to mask. So what you will have is when the girls are out socially, it's almost as though you're looking at someone who can be completely different because they are able to pick up on little cues of what people are doing, how they act and how they talk and how they are expected to get along in the groups that they're wanting to. However, what happens is often these people get so overwhelmed or tired from masking that when they get home, then there's a meltdown, or they just need space on their own, or they can't deal with an extra request. And so you're looking for reactions like that. So girls' stims can often be more subtle as well if they are autistic. So their stims can be flicking hair, twirling hair, can just be like that. That can be a stim. It can be just a little bit of a dance or a bit of a shake of the head or something like that. It can be doing a twirl, or it can be flicking of a pen. Or so they're not generally as big as some boys' stims that we know of. Also, they can just be like squeezing a fidget toy or something like that. Also, like I've said, their hyperfocus can often be more socially acceptable. So, hyper-focusing on a book or a book series, movies, music, bands, particular area of the arts, makeup, fashion, things like that. So they do get, I know a lot of girls who do have the hyperfocus aspect of both ADHD and autism, and who do display these hyperfocus areas, like I said, that are more socially acceptable. Often girls who have hyperactive part of ADHD as well, you will find that they are maybe called talkative in class. They blurt out things in conversation that aren't necessarily on topic. And perhaps their hyperactivity for their movement is dancing or gymnastics or something like that, instead of the running around the room kind of hyperactive that we see from males. So often these girls are described as being overly sensitive, or overly emotional is another thing. And it's anxiety that is picked up first in their diagnosis, which can lead further down onto the other diagnosis path. These girls can often daydream in class and that's what they're called. They're called daydreamers, and they kind of lose focus in class because that's what they're doing. But that is the inattentive side of the ADHD that we're looking at. Again, more females are being diagnosed with the inattentive side than males. They display signs of perfectionism, and that's part of the hyperfocus part of things as well. So really stick at something to get it perfect. But often what that might do is then that might lead to forgetfulness in other areas. So they're really hyper-focused on getting this particular one thing perfect, but everything else around them just doesn't enter into their minds because the hyper-focus and the perfectionism have come together, and they can't really concentrate on much else until that is done. Also, often it's harder to diagnose girls with who are neurodivergent because often, not always, obviously, they are more people pleasers. Again, this is a cultural thing, and girls just want to get things right, and be seen to be doing the right thing, and so. That comes back to the whole mimicking and masking. Going on to, we've done the whole falling apart at home, very common, and that more older females are now coming into being diagnosed. Extreme reactions, often girls with either who are either autistic or ADHD, like I said, can be called very emotional, but also part of diagnosis is very empathetic, so super empathetic to the point where it really disrupts their well-being sometimes because they're really taking on board other people's feelings. And what happens then also is that hyper focus starts, and they get it's really hard for these females to kind of move on from those feelings. So that's another part. So what I've seen in the last few years is like highly sensitive people. What I've actually found also is people who described themselves, especially these females who are now going back to be diagnosed as older adults, would have described themselves as highly sensitive. Like, I really feel what's going on. And yeah, mental health is a huge part of these diagnoses for these females. And that is what the main diagnosis has been. And then when it hasn't quite worked for either therapy or medication or things like that, then people are going in to kind of look at why that is. And so you've got, I guess, a couple of things happening. Males have been less likely in the past to come forward with mental health issues and possibly seen more as a female thing. And then also, females have been less likely to be identified as autistic and have ADHD, but it's more socially acceptable for them to have mental health issues. So we've got a few things playing into it, into things there. But what I'm trying to do is really start to advocate for teachers, educators, and the wider community to really see the differences between boys and girls, males and females, with what they show in symptoms of being autistic and having ADHD. Hoping that if females are being diagnosed at a younger age, what that means is that can possibly help them have less mental health issues and more understanding as they grow, and understanding of themselves as well, because I think that's really important to have, because if you know why you do something or why you are the way you are, then I think it helps your mental health and be who you understand yourself better, and then hopefully potentially down the line be a bit happier and sorry, I've just seen a comment in here that doesn't actually make any sense at all. So yeah, my hope is that we can really start to spread the word on girls who are neurodivergent and what to look out for, and really get out there and advocate for them, so that we don't have to have a situation where what we're having now, which is people decades down the line going back to have this diagnosis and feeling as though if it could have been diagnosed 20, 30 years ago, then their life would have been quite different, and the understanding of themselves would have been quite different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some, not checklists, but some information together and put it up on my Facebook page, and then you can have a look at it and hopefully take it into teachers and spread the word, and we can start advocating all of these things together, and get more understanding. Okay, thank you for coming on, and I will have all the information up later in the week. Bye.